Us now is an expert on criminal investigations and the spokesperson for the Connecticut Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection, Brian Foley. Brian, thanks so much for joining us today.
Good morning, Matt. Thanks for having me.
I want to get right into it. Before we get into the investigative side of this, you obviously have a background in criminal investigations. You were in law enforcement for some time, but I know, we're all human beings, and you're also a father. I mean, when you heard about what had happened, what was going through your mind?
Well, I think in Connecticut, it's especially impactful considering the similarities down there to what happened here in Sandy Hook. But you can't imagine how bad it is for so many others, and you want to be as sick as we feel. Imagine there's people feeling much worse. But as a parent, what do you immediately think of? And that is my child safe in their school? Is my child safe here in Connecticut? And what is Connecticut doing about it? And hopefully we'll get into a discussion about that today. But immediately you look to your own school system and what steps are they taking?
Yeah, you hug your kids a little tighter for sure. Same for me. There were reports that as that gunman was in the school right before he got in, some onlookers, shouted at the police who were outside. They said, charge in there, charge in there. Initial reports are they did not immediately do that. Do you have any thoughts on that? Did they do the right thing?
Well, I'm always skeptical of initial reports, and let's see how the investigation plays out. And while we don't know if some officers went in at this point and then called in the situation, and then some people backed out because it was a massacre, it's easy to second guess. Here's what I do know, Matt. Here in Connecticut, we train to enter and eliminate the threat, period. I can tell you, post Sandy Hook 14, 15, you kind of train to wait for others to arrive and then you enter the school. I don't know how they train in Texas, but nationally, most police around the nation train the first officer, first 2 or 3 officers. You go in and do your best to eliminate that threat or die trying. And it's difficult to do, and I guess it's a process in your own mind. What would you do if you were in that situation? But again, we don't know all the details at this point, and that will play out.
He was barricaded in the classroom for some time. In your experience, when you have a suspect that is barricaded and armed, what goes through your mind?
Well, it depends. Sometimes time is your ally, and you can take your time, but there are other factors that come into play. Are there other victims in there? Obviously, in this case, there were. Are there people that need medical treatment? I would say, again, there are people that did need medical treatment, obviously, and you'd want to, again, tend to expedite those things, but we don't know the situation. We don't know what the officers saw. We don't know what they said, but you can bet there will be a very thorough forensic follow-through of everything that occurred there that day, and we'll get an idea of what happened. I can say this. With each tragedy, each major tragedy that happens around the country, and unfortunately there's a bevy of mass shootings for us to choose from, there's an after action, and then lessons are learned, and police departments employ those lessons themselves in their own training and their own experiences for their own officers. So each department's going to look at what happened there and take lessons learned, hopefully, and improve upon it.
Brian, being a law enforcement officer, I imagine you see a lot of things that you don't necessarily want to see. But I can just only imagine, walking into that school and seeing that horrific, unspeakable tragedy, does that carry throughout your whole career, your whole life?
Personally, first of all, let me say I was the first one to respond to the Jesse Campbell murders, 3 women shot in the head right here on Sargent Street in Hartford. I got there alone. It's everyone processes it differently. I can tell you here in Connecticut, with Sandy Hook and so many first responders there, it's still playing out. It's certainly, maybe some people have processed and healed and moved on, first responders, that is, and it's not just them, it's everyone that's involved. Seeing one child killed, all right, and I would avoid those autopsies, avoid those scenes, because I had a kid, so I would try to avoid it. Seeing one's horrifying, and it will sit with you. Seeing 20 in that state, I can't imagine. So that's why, post Sandy Hook, other lessons learned here are the officer wellness issues that come into it, and having resources for officers, having, the support dogs. There's just so many different things for officers now to help get through these situations. I think you're going to see that play out, obviously, in Texas, but we're still living it here. I know state troopers that still struggle right now.
no doubt. We know that this shooter did send some online messages at some point prior to what he carried out. What can be done from an investigative standpoint to look at those messages and try and avoid this situation? I mean, is there any forensic surveillance online that's going on?
There are, but again, police departments can't watch every kid everywhere. Now, this is going to come down to intervening by the social media software folks that can, write an algorithm to detect this sort of thing. It's incredibly frustrating to know that this person put that stuff out there. The other thing that we're starting to see, if you look at Buffalo, and some of us in law enforcement have had the unfortunate privilege of seeing the unedited video, it is, and if you look at the shooting at that house of worship in New Zealand, it is identical to some of the video games that kids are playing around. And when you're sitting there playing, kids are playing that game 7-8 hours a night or longer, year over year, you get desensitized. The videos are identical. The real life videos of people being murdered are just like the ones in the games, only the person doesn't pop back up alive after.
Many Connecticut schools, I want to talk to you about something a little bit more locally. We'll bring it back to Connecticut. Many Connecticut schools have school resource officers, as you know. I mean, do you think that their presence in a school environment is helpful? Could that possibly be any kind of a deterrent for someone looking to bring harm on a school? Well,
I mean, we have a personal and a professional perspective. Personally, I'm happy that the town I have, Tallinn, has an armed, retired Hartford police officer. A couple guys in there retired from Hartford that are protecting our students. I am very thankful for that. It's a decision that should be left to each individual district on how they want the police to be interacting in schools. In Hartford, we had our officers, we developed an MOU, a memorandum of understanding between the police department and the school and school security on exactly how the officers would be used in those situations. And the SRO role has certainly evolved too. I mean, you didn't want the cops to be used for discipline for the teachers when the teachers had lost control of the student. You only wanted them there for violations of law. Back then, when we were doing that, the SRO was, someone that was involved in Officer Friendly, DARE, those types of programs, just to be there to develop good relationships with kids. It's evolved, unfortunately, because of all the shootings. Your SRO now is your first responder to these active shooters, and your SROs have had to go through an extensive level of a training now, at least here in Connecticut, in responding to an active shooter situation. And I, for one, am thankful. But look at some districts may want cops in their schools, some shouldn't. And that's why it's a decision best left for those individual districts.
Along those same lines, something that always seems to come up when a mass shooting in a school happens is, should teachers be armed? It's a very controversial topic. Your thoughts on that as a law enforcement professional?
Look, cops make mistakes handling firearms. And, this is in school with children. Learning to have a gun and use it in the right situation and never, ever have a mistake, I think you're inviting problems. I think if you're looking to introduce firearms into schools, which should be thought out very carefully, I think it's best left in the hands of someone with at least 20 years of handling said firearm under their belt and that have proven to be a proficient expert in its handling, because there can be no mistakes. And now we're going to teach a teacher to use a firearm and have it in the classroom around 20 kids. Accidents happen. I don't believe that's the best course of action to take. But I'm not saying that you shouldn't have armed security guards by any stretch.
Right. In the theme of lessons learned since Sandy Hook, one thing that I've noticed, my wife is a third grade teacher. They're building schools differently now. Yep. Her school, you have to go through 2 sets of locked double doors just to get in. It's called a vestibule, and there's all sorts of bullet-resistant glass in the school. So, in your opinion, I mean, are Connecticut schools safe enough? Are they building schools safe enough?
Let me pause for 1 second. In Connecticut, let me just say that an 18-year-old would not be able to buy that type of firearm.
Correct.
As far as Connecticut schools go, yes, I do. And again, unfortunately, we had Sandy Hook happen in our backyard. And since then, 2013, the state has enacted a lot of laws to help bolster school security, where you have multi-jurisdictional, different types of professionals on these teams where they plan out types of security. Each school has to submit a school security plan. Each school has to submit their drills. They have to do drills and submit the logs. That's done on a yearly basis, and it's planned out. So the state has also provided, in over $70 million has gone out, and it's a match deal. So you figure $140 million has been spent on school security infrastructure. And as you said in your school, yep, we like that double door human trap, yep, that somebody's in there. We like the camera systems. There's an extra $5 million grant right now for cameras, for radios. Look at teachers and administrators have cell phones. Try turning on your cell phone, running and dialing 911 and getting something to the cops. One-touch radios, emergency radios, we want those in schools that teachers and administrators can have where there's no dialing. It's one touch from that radio to the police department saying now. The 911 calls are going to come in. Those one-touch radio systems, police departments and schools can connect and have their camera systems where the school can press one button and immediately that camera access goes right to the police department, so they have it and they can see what's going on. There's panic buttons. All that stuff can be obtained through the state of Connecticut grant. Obviously, this administration has just put another stage of the grant in, and there's some different grants coming out also for houses of worship, yep, and nonprofits.
We have less than a minute left, so I just want to end on this. You know, preparing for something like this is nearly impossible. But I imagine it is very important to drill for active shooter scenarios. Yep. How often is that going on in Connecticut, and how helpful is that?
You know, it should be done at least with the town administrations. I believe once a year they should all do that, and different people in the administration should attend that training. And when I say administration, I don't necessarily mean the superintendent, but the superintendent, some principals, some teachers. You can't do them all at once, Matt, but every other year or so, that'd be great. They are all training. I think in Connecticut, our schools are way ahead of the curve. Tragically, because of what happened in Sandy Hook, we have taken those lessons and made our schools harder targets.
Brian Foley of the Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection. Brian, great to have you on.
Thanks
for
Matt.
being here.
Thank you.